Well, good afternoon, you guys. I am so happy to be back here on the Black Row podcast. It's your girl, Anjanae Slaughter, here with my lovely co-host, Miss Carol Mitchell. And we have a very special guest here in store for you guys, Mr. The Great, the Tacoma's finest, Mr. Lyle Quassim. First of all, Carol, how are you doing on this lovely Tuesday?
I'm very excited because we have royalty. We have Black royalty in the house.
That's right.
We have a King of Kings. I won't say Lord of Lords, but I'll say he's a King of Kings, that's for sure. And it's going to be a powerful conversation tonight. I think the audience is going to enjoy it immensely.
I am equally excited. Being a native to Seattle, I knew Lyle before I even moved out here to Tacoma. And for any of you guys know anything about Washington geography or just kind of the rivalries amongst cities, Tacoma and Seattle, people just often don't, commingle. So when you hear the name Lyle Quassim in Seattle, you know that he's a phenomenal man. So welcome, Lyle, to the Black Row podcast. It's our pleasure to have you here today. For our audience and viewers, would you mind just telling us a brief background on who you are, where you're from, and what your role and place is within the community of Tacoma?
Again, Lyle Quassim. I was born in Chicago in 1943. I have two brothers, one sister. My younger brother passed about 20 years ago. My older brother and I are just about as much in love with one another as we could be. And my sister keeps us all in line. I left Chicago in 1967 in the military. I had done what my mother called a university tour. She said at one of these universities, you're going to have to buy some books as opposed to know where all the social events were. But I had a student deferment and I didn't want to go into the military. But I eventually, after several unsuccessful university adventures, lost that deferment, was drafted into the military. And that brought me to the Pacific Northwest. I served in Vietnam. And as a medic. So my view of that war was a very horrific view. The people that I saw were all in dire straits, physically and psychologically. I went back to school, finished my undergraduate degree at the University of Puget Sound, my graduate degree at Pacific Lutheran University. Was adjunct faculty for a couple of years at PLU. My academic calling was in sociology and psychology. And I've used that liberal arts education in a very interesting way, which has leveraged me through many, many situations. I became associated with the Black Collective, which was not the Black Collective at that time. We went through several names and name changes in the late 60s, early 70s. And I tell people when I became a liberal, it was a move to the right. I worked for the Vince Ramos Brigade. I trained people to go to Cuba, NACLA, the North American Conference on Latin America. I taught school for the Black Panther Party in Tacoma on 20 First and L Street was where the Black Panther House was. Had been radicalized by my parents. My mother was a member of the Communist Party. I was even more radicalized when I became a tool of imperialism fighting in the Vietnam War. But I understood that one has to deal with the situations of their immediate times and an immediate community. And I really appreciated what I saw in Black people in Tacoma. Very different from how I grew up in Chicago. I grew up with the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, all of those things in Chicago. And it was much more neighborhood oriented, a little business oriented, sports oriented. But it was a good community. And I really fell in love with the Black community and the Pacific Northwest. And when I moved over from the far left to the middle left, I started to hang out more with Black folks of that generation. And it has been an absolute, I could not have designed the process to make it better than it has been. There are people that I've grown up with. When I joined the Black Collective, I was in my 20s. I am now about to shake hands with 80. I'll be 79 this year, 80 next year. And so I spent most of my life in the Black Collective with my brothers and sisters in that space. And we figured out how to make it happen. A lot of it is through time and talent and perseverance and the ability to set goals and reach for those goals. Some of it's just plain luck in terms of people running into one another, intersecting at a particular time in their life. But it is I had a job offer in the American Virgin Islands to be the health officer of the American Virgin Islands. And my wife was putting together a for sale by owner placard out in front of our house. And I said, I'm not leaving Tacoma. She said, not for the Virgin Islands. I said, no. I said, this is home. Chicago's not home. The Virgin Islands are not home. Tacoma in the Pacific Northwest is my home.
That's love. Now, I've been to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I don't know if I would have made the same choice. Oh, especially, standing up on those hills and looking down at turquoise blue water. But listen, I'm just wondering about 1969, and we've been talking about the May 11, 1969 Mother's Day uprising. We had former Mayor Bill Baarsma on the podcast, former Senator Rosa Franklin, your partner in all things good, James L. Walton, and Imam Amir Abdul Mateen was our visitor last week. And they all have a perspective on what the catalysts were for that uprising. So I'm wondering, what's your perspective? What was happening in Tacoma in 1968 that led to May 11, 1969, in your point of view?
So first of all, let me be really clear. I was in this community during the time of the Mother's Day uprising. But I was not on the side of the peacemakers. And Jim and Harold and Bill Baarsma and those folks were. I was still in my radical two-step before I learned how to do a moderate liberal waltz. and so my dance partners were from the radical left, and we thought, at some point, people should rise up. People should say, we need to change, quote unquote, the paradigm of how we exist in this community. And so I was at arm's length. I wasn't one of the people who stepped in and got between the authorities and the younger people. I left the area totally and waited and hoped that maybe we would have a even more radical moment. And so when the appeasement and the reconciliation occurred, I was not necessarily in favor of it. We used to have a saying on the left is that change happens when you heighten the contradiction. Change doesn't happen when you smooth out the differences, because the controlling authority, all those differences are always smoothed out to the advantage of the people who are in charge. There may be movement for you and whatever community it is, but it is not the kind of radical change. And I said before, I grew up in a very left-wing household. I worked with the Vincent Ramos Brigade. We trained people to go to Cuba and Latin America. And we talked about revolution. And I had been in war. And I knew what it took to struggle and to fight. And so at that moment in time, I was not in sync with the people who were working to reduce the conflict in the community at that time. I eventually came to admire, love, trust those folks. They're people that I grew up with. I trust with my life. I mean, to me, that's the highest calling of friendship and admiration and love, is that you would trust that person with your life. But at that moment, that's not where I was.
So to piggyback off of that, and I logically, right, I love where you're coming from as far as heightening the contradiction, because we know that these systems and the people in power it's not broken if from their perspective, right? The system is working exactly how it was designed to work. So, and now we see this a lot amongst our millennials. I'm a millennial myself, looking towards independence, looking towards a new system, not looking to mobilize within a broken system, but create our own systems. So I'm wondering, what event, was it the uprising that birthed the Black Collective and this idea that independence, we need to come together solidify, unify, and mobilize amongst ourselves? Or what was that event that birthed the Black Collective?
And it was a series of events. There was a series of events. We look at social construct, and again, my academic background is in social psychology, and there are real clear empirical standards that come to play when different parts of communities coalesce. And it is not particularly unique to the Black community, but the Black community is a part of that. And what we had were a convergence of economic issues, political issues, social and legal justice issues that all were put in to play at different levels, but at a particular time in the formation of the Black Collective. So we had people from the streets, we had people with GEDs, and we had people with PhDs who ended up kind of coming into the same space. And we started to talk about the fact that when the system confronted us, and it's most obvious when you see law enforcement, because it's a clear confrontation and it's not ambiguous, but it exists in a lot of different places. But if you and I are walking down the street and I got a PhD and you have an MD and a third person comes up to talk to us with a GED, what the system sees are not 3 levels of academic attainment. They see 3 Black people. and they can treat you like three Black people,
Right.
and your PhD will not save you, and you won't be any better off than the person with the GED. And so, so it's at some point we learned how to coalesce, and knew that we were stronger together than we were working individually, and that there was more to the struggle than just economics. So if you adopt the we're going to make more money, you're going to get a better education, make more money, live in a big house, then you're kind of adopting the same principles that got you into to a difficult social situation. So, who are you going to oppress? And so we had a good blend of better education, better economic development, better healthcare, better ways of living and appreciating one another. And so it is this, sometimes you realize when you got the stew just right, you got all the ingredients, they mix and they blend together. And it was hard work. And the collective has been, is not a monolith. We were different in the 70s than we were in the 80s. Then we had about a 20-year period where we were really honing and developing who we were in our social identity. And then we changed. We had a big change. And then 3 years ago, just before COVID, we were on another plateau. And then we had COVID. Now we've gone digital. In the last 2 years, the Black Collective has become younger. The meetings are larger. We used to have 40 people in person. Now we haven't had a meeting this year when there are under 100 people who show up. We had an average age of about 55. Now our average age is in the mid 40s. We have now more women than we've ever had at the collective. We have a different kind of social model, a different kind of business model. And so the vitality of the collective has been its ability to morph and change and adjust to what a certain section of the Black community needed at that time.
So what's different about the Black collective? At the time, there was a SNCC and a SLIC and a Tacoma Urban League. There was the Nation of Islam and Obi out there at TCC, James L. Walton, shout out. There was the NAACP. What was it that the Black collective, what niche do you feel like, what space did you inhabit in that universe that needed to be filled?
And what you have in each one of those organizations, from those organizations at Tacoma Community College to a national organization like the NAACP, all of them have structures, and they all have a set of rules and roles and responsibilities. And the Black collective was a collective of all those organizations. And so we met every week. And so we were always available. And so we had Dolores Silas from the NAACP. We had Tom Dixon from the Urban League. We had people from the civic and fraternal organizations. And then we had people unaffiliated who came and showed up. We had folks from the religious community, pastors. We had a big tent. We had people who were homophobic in the same room with people who were gay. We had folks who loved the environment and were close to eco-terrorists. And we had other folks who wanted to open up businesses, construction businesses, restaurant businesses. And so we all found the commonality that you couldn't get out of SNCC, that you couldn't get solely out of a national organization like the NAACP, that you couldn't get from a local a gathering of college students whose main focus was education. I mean, we were the big tent, and the sustainability of the Black Collective has been the ability to keep that tent large enough and keep all those voices in the tent present enough so that they could engage and feel heard and have a sense of belonging.
So that's the blueprint right there. You want to know how to sustain an organization. We'll make sure it's inclusive, make sure everybody has value, right, in their voice, and they just feel welcome. They feel like they're a part of the organization. I love that, because nowadays, I mean, we live in a world of technology. We live in a world of immediate gratification, right? People don't, I mean, young people, they can either DoorDash or microwave their food. I mean, I don't know. You only get real home cooked meals around the holidays in some of my friends' houses. So it's just like, when change is long, change is slow. It's very gradual, right? Especially when we're talking about policy. In keeping that sustainability and momentum up, I mean, it's a challenge, right? So what are some tips that maybe you can give to us millennials that are, you know, we have the energy now, but, you know, might get burned out later?
So here's a couple of tips. I'm glad you asked me that question. The first tip I would say is do the things that you love. Bring into the organization your best self. Bring your core competency, but also bring a spirit of appreciation, a spirit of working with volunteers. And the currency for volunteers is gratitude. And we must show one another that level of respect and gratitude, whether you agree with them or don't agree with them. Because you always have more in common than you have that's different. And if you can get people to focus on the commonalities that they have, you will find that the differences that they have will take a lower and lower priority. In the organizations that I go to who stake out territory and defend that territory at all costs, no matter how the social winds change, they become stale, they become stagnant, they become entrenched in a certain orthodoxy that doesn't allow them to engage across different stratas. I mean, I don't have any children, and I got 24 Father's Day greetings last Father's Day, and because there's nothing that I have that I won't give to the next person, no matter what their age is, and there's nothing that I expect in return, other than to be appreciative in one another's space. So at the Black Collective. Now this is going to be a little bit of a stretch because I only got so much time. At the Black Collective, there are a couple of things that are absolutely remarkable. First of all, we don't take attendance. You come when you decide you want to come to the Black Collective. Now, if you got something else better to do, I will urge you to go do it, because I don't want you to come to the Black Collective and be mad because you think that you should be at the beach, or you think that you should be rolling with your girls down the street doing something. I mean, if that's where your head is, go do that. And when you finish that and you have time to come and engage and bring your best self to this engage, then show up. And nobody, you don't tell grown folks what to do with their time. You don't say to people that you respect, well, where was you last week? You haven't been here in a month. What kind of conversation is that? I mean, it's so simple, but you'd be surprised how many people do that. Another thing is that you remember the Black collective because you're Black. You need to, is there something we need to fill out? I said, no, you filled it out a long time ago.
It's on your birth certificate.
You were born into this.
and so come on in. And people say, well, what do I need to do? I said, you don't have to do anything. You can come and just be in the space. Nobody's going to say, okay, now you're here. Now what committee are you going to do? Are you going to do this? Or can you give us this? Or I tell people who come to Black Collective, I would come here for a year and just hang out. And when you find there's something that you want to do, then go do that. You don't do things that you've been assigned to. Okay, we're going to assign you to this committee. Now, I'm really, now Carol's going to laugh at this. I really have a great respect for my talent. Somebody to tell me what to do it's not going to fit well with me. And so why would I? Go ahead.
But the beautiful thing about the approach you take, in the times that I have found time to be there on Saturday mornings in person, it's as if I've been there every Saturday morning since the whole thing begins. There's no feeling of not, your seat that you normally sit in is still there for you.
Right.
20 years later at the Colored Women's Club, right?
Right.
But I do, we need to wrap up pretty soon here, but I do wonder, you have used a variety of tools to make change happen, to open people's eyes to the reality of discrimination, to set boundaries around what you would allow people to do with your life and your career. Mm-hmm. You made a lot of personal sacrifices. You went to war on a number of occasions on behalf of yourself and your own best interests. So tell our young people, and me too, at what point when you run an organization do you have to, how do you balance what's good for you as a person and what's in your personal best interest as opposed to what might be good for the organization? How do you make sure you keep those two things in balance?
And I drifted away from a question I was asked earlier, and you brought me back. Thanks, Carol. Is that I used to love dancing, and I never got tired of dancing. And I used to love going out to the club. I said, it's 3:00. We got to go home.
No. You ain't got to go home. You just got to get up out of here.
Right. And so if you do something that you really enjoy, there is a nourishment, personal nourishment, that you enjoy because you're nourished by that personally, and it also helps the organization that you work with. And so I said, I never got tired of smoking weed and doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So why would I get tired of working on behalf of Black men and women who are in difficult situations? I get stoked. And so it helps me. And most people who are generous people, you will find that their generosity is also very selfish, because we often get more out of giving than the receiver, because how it makes us feel. And when I see a old person who has come to us and needs something, and he or she gets that, I get overjoyed. When I see a young person who comes and uses the Black Collective as a simple transactional relationship. I need a job. I need this. And we never see him again. I get overjoyed about that. They're not dues that you have to pay here. You pay your dues every day living Black in America. And so when you show up here, there are givers, there are people who come and get, and there are people who take. And they're both correct. And so some people will say, well, we're going to do this and we'll never see that person again. I say, that's cool. But so Carol, you have to deal with self-care, and you have to deal with organizational priorities, and you have to be able to separate the two. But if you can get as close as you can to what you like and what nourishes you, and that is a product of a gift to help other people. I ran the state's largest agency. I had a $5 billion budget. Would it be? Now you got a hoodie from the west side of Chicago running the state's largest agency.
West side.
I had 17,000 employees. We spent $14 million a day. I had 7 lines of business, and I'm still Black. I didn't get up in front of the legislature shucking and jiving, but everybody knew I was Black. There was no, I said, I ain't in the club. I'm just doing the work, but I know where white people are. And I thought I got close to the club, and I lost my way, and the white folks fired my ass.
Well, you can be in the house, but you're never going to be in the family.
And I said, now, Lyle Qasim, you look how you were raised, look what you know, and what fantasy land were you in thinking that you could do the same thing that white people did? And they straightened me up. Boy, they straightened me up. And I came back. I was the first non-physician to direct this 4 state psychiatric hospitals. I was the first Black mental health director. I was the first secretary of the Department of Social and Health Services. And I was fired as the state mental health director. You know where I went today? I got fired on the Friday. You know where I went on Saturday? To the Black Collector.
Of course you did.
Full circle. Mm-hmm.
Full circle.
It is, I jump off the roof every day and I've never hit the ground because I have people around me. And there are other people who jump off the roof and I'll never let them hit the ground because I'm going to be around them. And so it is a virtuous circle, steeped in mutuality, knowing that we have our differences, knowing that we won't agree on every issue. And sometimes we don't agree on hardly any issue, but we are still bonded by the fact that we've come through this same crucible of being Black in America. And we know what that means. And we're not going to forget what that means. We know that we owe. Mm-hmm. We know that we owe. And so we stay in the struggle. Jim Walton's my boy. Jim Walton, who you met, he's a nicer Lyle Qasim.
Does he know that?
Yeah, he knows that. He's a strong man of faith. But if you want somebody hurt, call Lyle.
Call Lyle.
Well, this is such a gift tonight to hear this wisdom, to capture it. And we've had an offer from some of our friends out at Pacific Lutheran University to make sure that this little tiny library of Black history that we're creating through these podcasts and these videos will be available for the community at large at some moment in time. When people are doing a Google search for Lyle Qasim in 2085, this video and this podcast will show up in your library, in your history. So thank you so much for giving us that gift.
Just quick 2 seconds. at some point in time, we're going to name a big something after Jim Walton.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a school, a building. I guarantee you they will never name anything after
we might name a club. We might name a club the LQ. Okay.
Well, but certainly the lives that you've touched through your work and the service you gave as a military veteran, the lives that you touched through your work at the collective and in communities, sitting on countless boards with and without white people. People know who you are. It's a recognizable brand. There is a Lyle Quasim brand, and you wear it well, and it's an honorable legacy that we're grateful that we have a chance to capture it tonight on the Black Robe podcast. And beautiful Anjanée Slaughter is going to close it out with a final thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lyle. Your legacy will live on. I just have been touched in so many different ways over this brief 30 minutes in this conversation on, you know, how I'm going to navigate through certain spaces, you know, and just continue to give and be my genuine self, regardless of other people's agendas, because that authenticity, that genuine care is what sustains relationships. It's what sustains organizations. And it's how you got 24 Father's Day cards without any kids. So that's the type of legacy I want to leave on this earth. Thank you so much for sharing yourself, your words, your wisdom, and your story with us today. Thank you all at home for watching our show. Once again, our faithful viewers, we really do appreciate you. You know, I got to plug our Freedom Summer Symposium coming up. This is our biggest call to action event. It's our second annual from the IBJ. This year, it'll be in person at Pacific Lutheran University on May 19th and 20th from 10 to 2 p.m. If you guys are in the Tacoma or Seattle area, please stop by, learn some more about this blueprint that our elders have set up for us, and then you'll hear from our millennials on how we're going to update it and make it for us now in this 21st century. So thank you guys. On that note, we're going to peace out, and we'll see you guys next week.